Long ago, during a time when modern means of transport did not exist, people relied on walking or bullock carts to travel long distances. In one such era, a young man found himself on a long and tiring journey. As night began to fall, he arrived at a small town and decided to rest in a humble roadside inn. Though his destination was still far away, fate had something special in store for him that in the same inn, an elderly man was also staying. Coincidentally, the old man was also heading to the same village as the young man, a place called Shanagar. While sharing a meal together at the inn, the two got to know each other and decided to travel together the next morning. The young man, however, had one strange condition. He requested that the old man should not question any of his actions during the journey, no matter how unusual or senseless they might seem. Slightly puzzled, but curious and eager to have company, the old man agreed. Thus began an extraordinary journey that was not only full of unexpected events, but also hidden wisdom. With the journey underway, the young man and the old traveler walked for hours through forests and dusty paths. As the sun rose higher, the scorching heat and exhaustion began to take a toll on them. By noon, both were weary and decided to rest under a large, shady tree. The tree offered cool shade, and it seemed like the perfect place to relax and eat. They unpacked their food, and just as the old man recited Bismillah and prepared to begin eating, the young man suddenly stopped him and said, "Please wait a moment." The old man, confused but silent, watched as the young man pulled out an umbrella from his belongings. Then, without a word, he opened the umbrella and held it above his head with his left hand while eating with his right. The old man stared in disbelief. "What kind of foolishness is this?" he thought. "We are already under thick shade, and yet he opens an umbrella." The absurdity of the act almost forced the old man to speak out. He was about to ask the reason when he suddenly remembered the promise he had made, to not ask any questions. Unable to control his curiosity, the old man finally broke his silence and asked, "Why are you using an umbrella under such a shady tree?" The young man looked at him sternly and reminded him of the agreement. "You promised not to question anything I do," he said. "Now that you've broken your word, our journey together must end here." Embarrassed and ashamed, the old man quickly apologized. "I made a mistake. Please forgive me. I won't question you again." And so, with tension hanging in the air, their journey continued. But this strange incident was only the beginning. Many more odd behaviors were yet to come. As the day wore on, the two travelers continued walking through the thick forest, surrounded by silence and nature. By evening, darkness began to spread slowly, and the sky was painted with the colors of dusk. Tired from walking all day, the old man could hardly keep going. Eventually, he sat down under a tree, leaned against its trunk, and said, "Let's rest here for the night. We can continue our journey after some sleep." But to his surprise, the young man shook his head and replied, "Not here, elder. We need to find a tree strong enough for both of us to sleep on its branches." The old man stared at him in disbelief. Sleep on a tree? He thought. What madness is this? He wanted to ask, why not sleep safely on the ground like normal people? But he bit his tongue, remembering the promise. His face showed frustration, but he remained silent. The young man then found a strong, wide tree with thick branches and helped the old man climb it. Though it was difficult, the young man patiently supported him and then climbed up himself. They both leaned against the trunk and prepared to rest. The old man, exhausted, soon fell asleep, but the young man stayed alert, waking up at the slightest sound, checking below now and then, always cautious. The night passed slowly with the young man staying half awake, as if expecting danger at any moment. In the morning, as the sun rose and the birds chirped, the young man gently woke the old man. He helped him down from the tree, and they ate some leftover food before continuing their journey. The old man still didn't understand the reason behind sleeping in the tree, but deep inside, he knew it wasn't foolishness. Something about it felt wise. After traveling for several more hours, the young man and the old traveler found themselves standing before a wide river. There was no bridge in sight, and the only way to reach the other side was to walk through the water. The current wasn't too strong, and the water wasn't very deep, but it was still enough to soak their clothes and belongings if they weren't careful. The old man, being cautious, immediately removed his shoes, tied them together, and tucked them under his arm to keep them dry. To his astonishment, the young man walked straight into the river, without removing his shoes. Water quickly entered and soaked them completely. The old man, watching from behind, shook his head in disbelief. What kind of person willingly ruins new shoes like this, he thought. It made no sense, but just as he was about to say something, he stopped himself. The memory of his broken promise still lingered. He had already been warned once. So, biting his lip and holding back his frustration, he remained silent. The two crossed the river without incident. On the other side, the old man dried his feet and wore his shoes again, while casting a curious, almost mocking glance at the young man's drenched footwear. The young man, however, didn't seem bothered at all. He simply continued walking, as if wet shoes didn't matter in the slightest. Though he didn't say a word, the old man was full of questions. Why would he ruin his shoes like that? Is he careless or simply foolish? But as the journey continued, a small voice in the back of his mind started to whisper, perhaps there's more to these actions than meets the eye. Once again, he was reminded that sometimes wisdom wears a disguise of madness. After days of walking through forests, crossing rivers, and enduring strange experiences, the young man and the old traveler finally approached the outskirts of Shannagar, the village that had been their shared destination. The sun was beginning to rise higher in the sky, and the warmth of midday slowly settled in. Both travelers were tired, but the young man seemed more focused than ever. With quickening steps, he encouraged the old man. Let's hurry, elder. Our journey is almost over. The old man, aching and fatigued, followed behind with heavy steps. Though he still carried doubts about the young man's odd behavior, like sleeping in trees or walking into rivers with his shoes on, he had slowly begun to realize that maybe, just maybe, there was wisdom hidden behind those strange actions. But the mysteries remained unsolved. As they reached the village, the old man turned to the young man with a smile and said warmly, "Son, why don't you come to my house? My daughter is an excellent cook. You're our guest today." The young man politely declined, saying, "Thank you, but I must meet my relative first. I will not even stay at his house. Just visit him and spend the night in a nearby inn." Surprised, but not offended, the old man nodded. As they were about to part ways, the young man gave one final piece of advice. Before entering your home, knock on the door and cough softly to let your family know you've arrived. The old man laughed inwardly. What a strange request, he thought. Why knock on my own home? Still, he agreed and walked toward his house, while the young man headed to the inn. Little did the old man know, this simple advice was about to change everything. As the old man neared his house, his heart filled with joy. After days of travel, he was finally home. But the young man's final words echoed in his mind. Knock on the door and cough softly before entering. Though it felt unnecessary, after all, it was his own house. He decided to follow the advice out of respect and curiosity. He stood outside the door, coughed gently, and knocked. A moment later, a panicked voice came from inside. "Who's there?" It was his daughter. Hearing his voice, she rushed to open the door, pale and trembling. When she saw her father alive and well, she burst into tears and embraced him tightly. "I thought you were gone," she sobbed. "I didn't know what to do." Confused, the old man asked what had happened. His daughter explained. Last night, a group of dacoits entered the village. They killed a traveler who was sleeping under a tree just outside the forest. If he had slept there, her voice choked with fear. Suddenly, everything became clear to the old man. The young man's strange behavior had actually saved his life. Sleeping on the tree had protected them from bandits. Crossing the river with shoes on it protected their feet from hidden thorns and sharp stones. Holding an umbrella under a shady tree had trained the old man in obedience and patience. And now, knocking before entering had prevented him from walking in on a potentially dangerous situation. Tears welled in the old man's eyes, not from fear, but from realization. The young traveler wasn't a fool. He was wise beyond his years. His strange behavior had been a shield, a teacher, and a silent guardian. That day, the old man learned a powerful lesson. Never judge a person's actions until you understand their reasons. Later that evening, after the old man had calmed down and shared the entire story of his journey with his daughter Gulnaar, she sat silently, deep in thought. Her father described every moment. The strange umbrella under the shady tree, the decision to sleep in a tree, the wet shoes, and finally, the advice to knock on his own door. Gulnar listened attentively, her eyes wide with wonder and understanding. After a pause, she finally spoke, her voice steady and thoughtful. Abba, this was no ordinary traveler. He was a man of rare wisdom, someone who sees the world differently. Everything he did had a reason. At first, it looked foolish, even childish. But when we look deeper, we find meaning behind every action. She explained, by holding the umbrella under the tree, he was testing your patience, whether you would react or trust him. When you failed that test, he reminded you of your promise. He wasn't just protecting himself, he was training you to control your tongue and your emotions. When he insisted on sleeping in the tree, he was saving both your lives. He knew danger was near, and crossing the river with shoes on, perhaps he valued health and readiness over material things. Wet shoes dry, but wounded feet can stop a journey. Gulnar paused, then added, and his last advice, to knock, was the most meaningful of all. He was preparing you for something unexpected. His wisdom may have seemed strange, but it was rooted in deep understanding of people, places, and possibilities. Her father nodded, deeply moved. Through Gulnar's words, he saw the young traveler's actions in a new light. It was not madness, but mercy, not ignorance, but insight. And so, the story of a strange journey became a lesson passed down through generations. A few days had passed since the old man's return, but the events of the journey still lingered in his heart. He often sat quietly, remembering each moment, the umbrella, the tree, the river, and the knock, and the wisdom behind them. He couldn't forget the young traveler's calm demeanor, his silence, and the quiet strength he carried. The old man now saw him not just as a stranger, but as a guide sent by destiny. One morning, as the sun painted golden rays across the village fields, the old man said to Gulnar, "Daughter, that young man must not leave our lives just like that. He has touched my heart and taught me lessons I would never have learned in 100 journeys. I want you to meet him." Gulnar, who already held a deep respect for the traveler through her father's story, smiled softly. "I was hoping you'd say that." That very afternoon, the old man went to the nearby inn where the traveler was staying. He found him sitting alone, calmly sipping water and looking out at the fields. The old man approached with humility and said, "Son, you have honored me with your companionship and taught me the value of silence, trust, and wisdom. My daughter and I would be grateful if you joined us for a meal and perhaps stayed with us for some time." The young man looked into the old man's eyes and saw nothing but sincerity. He smiled gently and nodded. "It would be my honor." That evening, he arrived at the house, not as a guest, but as someone awaited with warmth and respect. Little did anyone know, this invitation would mark the beginning of something far greater than just a shared meal. It would shape their futures forever. That evening, the atmosphere in the old man's house was filled with warmth and curiosity. The table was set with care, freshly cooked rice, fragrant curry, sweet flatbreads, and warm milk. Gulnar had prepared everything with her own hands, eager to serve the man whose wisdom had earned her father's deep admiration. The young traveler arrived with his usual quiet smile, greeted both hosts respectfully, and sat down at the dinner table. As they began to eat, the old man tried to make conversation, but the traveler remained mostly quiet, answering politely with brief words. Yet again, his silence felt thoughtful rather than rude. It was during the meal that something unusual happened. The traveler picked up a spoonful of curry and, without tasting it, gently placed it back on the plate. He then picked up a piece of roti, tore it neatly into 4 parts, but only ate one. After that, he poured milk into his bowl, stirred it once, and then left it untouched. The old man watched with confusion. Gulnar, too, noticed every small action but remained calm. After the meal, as the traveler stood to thank them, the old man finally asked, "Forgive me, but may I ask, why did you only taste part of the food? Was something wrong?" The young man smiled. "No, nothing was wrong. I simply wanted to observe something, not in the food, but in you." The old man and Gulnar looked at each other, puzzled. The traveler added, "Sometimes, how people react to small oddities reveals what their hearts are truly made of." You asked, not with judgment, but curiosity. That means more than you think. The room fell silent, not with confusion, but with awe. Another lesson had quietly unfolded at the dinner table. The morning after the dinner, the old man sat on his veranda, sipping tea, lost in thought. The traveler's presence had brought peace to his home, and his words continued to echo in the old man's heart. With each passing hour, his respect for the young man deepened. Gulnaar, too, had noticed something rare in him, a calm presence, a depth of thought, and a quiet dignity that couldn't be ignored. Later that day, after much thought, the old man called Gulnaar and spoke gently. "Daughter, you've heard the stories, and now you've met him yourself. I believe this man is no ordinary soul. He sees the world with wisdom few possess. I would be honored to call him my son-in-law, if you agree." Gulnaar's cheeks flushed, but she didn't look away. "Abba, I've never seen anyone like him. His silence speaks louder than words, and his actions teach more than sermons. If he agrees, I will be proud to marry him." With her consent, the old man went to the young traveler that very evening. He didn't use flowery words or formalities. He simply said, "Son, I've grown to respect you deeply. You carry a light that our home has long missed. If it is in your heart, I would be honored to offer you my daughter's hand in marriage." The young traveler paused, looked into the old man's eyes, then toward the house where Gulnaar stood quietly watching from a window. After a moment, he nodded slowly. "If your daughter agrees, and Allah wills, I accept with humility." The old man's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but gratitude. What had begun as a simple journey had turned into a destiny far greater than anyone could have imagined. The story of the wise traveler and the old man is more than just an account of an unusual journey. It is a timeless lesson about judgment, patience, and the hidden value of silence. At first glance, the traveler's behavior seemed odd, even foolish. But as the events unfolded, it became clear that behind every action was deep thought, quiet wisdom, and a purpose only revealed in time. The old man, who once mocked the traveler, came to respect and even admire him. And Gulnaar, with her calm heart and sharp mind, saw the traveler not just with her eyes, but with understanding. This tale teaches us never to judge someone by their appearance or actions alone. Wisdom doesn't always speak loudly or wear fine clothes. Sometimes it walks barefoot, remains silent, and lets life do the explaining. The traveler taught by example, not by speeches. His calm behavior in the face of mockery, his silence in the face of questions, and his choices in the face of danger all revealed a soul deeply rooted in experience and humility. The journey, filled with rivers, forests, and mysterious actions, eventually led to a beautiful end, a bond of marriage built not on wealth or charm, but on wisdom and mutual respect. The old man, once proud and quick to speak, became a humble learner, and Gulnaar, intelligent and observant, gained a life partner who matched her spirit. In closing, this story reminds us that real understanding takes time, that patience opens the door to truth, and that the most valuable people often appear when we least expect them. The lesson is simple, yet powerful. Sometimes, the one who walks quietly beside you holds the answer to questions you didn't even know you needed to ask.